Join us on a voyage of discovery. Some 400,000 German-speaking Jews fled the Nazis, taking some of their culture to their new homes. We went in search of that German Jewish cultural heritage. This week, we're in Argentina.
After more than 60 years in Argentina, when I hear the word tree, I still think of the linden tree in the village of Ranna in the hills of Franconia. Now and then I'll think of an oak or a fir tree, but never or only rarely an ombu tree in the Pampas.
Buenos Aires, 11,500 kilometers from the linden tree of Robert Schopflocher's childhood memories. He was 14 when he had to leave his home in Fürth in Bavaria. Now, nearing 90, he's been an estate manager, an import merchant, a painter, and a writer. He writes in both German and Spanish and has published short stories, poems, and novels. He's also published an autobiography, Weit von wo, Leben zwischen drei Welten, which translates as far from where, living between three worlds.
Perhaps the strapline should have been in three worlds rather than between three worlds. As you can see here in my home, there are expressionist woodcuts, Argentinian paintings, and Jewish silver. They're symbols of three worlds.
His life between three worlds began in 1937, when Robert, his mother, and his brother followed his father into exile in Argentina.
This is my mother's passport. My brother and I are included in it. And this is the notorious red J that the Swiss authorities insisted upon, so that all the countries you travel to would know they were letting Jews in.
Today, 4 generations of the Schopflocher family live in Buenos Aires. Robert's wife, Ruth, also emigrated here from Germany. The couple had 2 sons and now have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Their son Mario has researched the family tree and found some 700 Schopflochers scattered around the world.
It gives us some idea of where we came from. Not where we're going, because no one can know that. But it's reassuring to know where you come from and that you're not alone in this world.
And every now and then it's nice to spot a family resemblance. The Schopflochers were a German family like any other, until the Nazis seized power in 1933. They stayed for another 4 years. Robert's father was the first to leave. Other relatives stayed and paid with their lives.
This is my grandmother. She chose not to emigrate, but to put her head in the oven and turn on the gas.
By 1941, over 40,000 German Jews had fled to Argentina. Among them, the grandparents of the journalist and writer Ariel Magnus. His other grandmother settled in Sao Paulo, Brazil. For many years, his family never spoke about what she'd lived through in a concentration camp.
Meine Großmutter wollte darüber nicht sprechen und ihre Kinder haben nicht viel gefragt. Es ist auch kein schönes Thema.
My grandmother never wanted to talk about it, and her children never asked. It's not the sort of thing you want to talk about. I was never very interested. My own sorry story was the Argentinian dictatorship rather than the German dictatorship. A strange development.
Eine kuriose Entwicklung.
In 1976, Ariel Magnus was just a year old when the president was overthrown in a right-wing coup d'etat and a military junta installed. In subsequent years, thousands of political dissidents simply disappeared.
The military dictatorship in Argentina was pretty anti-Semitic. Many in the Jewish community were communists and opposed the government. It was a terrible time. I know cases of Jewish people who were persecuted in Germany and emigrated here only to be persecuted once again. Of my circle of friends, half of them lost their parents in those years. Many of them are Jewish. So this chapter in history is more immediate to me than the Nazi period.
10 years ago, Ariel Magnus began asking his grandmother in Brazil about what had happened to her in Germany. He ended up writing a book. It tells the story of a young nurse who chose to follow her mother to the Theresienstadt and Auschwitz concentration camps and miraculously survived. It's an unconventional portrait of a young woman and her relationship in later life with her grandson.
All of a sudden I saw my grandmother's face with its very visible traces of her past, and it was deeply shocking. Everything changed with my grandmother after I wrote the book.
His grandmother even visited Germany. Ariel himself went there to study, and it was there that he began exploring his roots.
When I was there, I realized that a lot of the things that I thought were part of my Jewish heritage are actually German. Going to bed early, collecting Easter eggs. I don't know. All these traditions weren't Jewish, but German. I think my upbringing was more German than Jewish, even if my parents and many others in my family don't like to admit it. In a way, the fact that I was brought up German was a betrayal.
Ariel attended the Pestalozzi school, as Robert Schopflocher had 50 years earlier. Back then, it was the only German school in Buenos Aires that wasn't Nazified. Nazi influence reached as far as Argentina.
The school was founded when all the other schools were brought into line by the Nazis. It had happened very fast. As soon as Hitler came to power in 1933, all the German associations, the German hospital, gym club and schools were Nazified. Everyone had to give the Hitler salute, and swastikas appeared everywhere. That was why the Pestalozzi school was founded. Over the years, it became one of the most important cultural institutes for Germans who had fled the Nazis. We learnt Spanish there. And let me put it this way, we enjoyed the last rays of the setting sun of middle-class Germany's classical education tradition. I owe the Pestalozzi school a lot.
Despite the Holocaust, Schopflocher never cut his ties to the country he was born in. He frequently returns, and his grandchildren have also visited Germany. They learn German at school.
It's our second home. We feel very comfortable here. We don't just learn the language, we're also interested in German culture. It's very important to us. I'd be very happy to send my children to the Pestalozzi school one day. It's a tradition we want to uphold from generation to generation.
Every Saturday, Schopflocher buys the Argentinisches Tageblatt, a German-language weekly newspaper founded in 1878. It's popular mainly in the neighborhood of Belgrano, where many German Jewish emigres live. Barrio Once is home to the Orthodox Jewish community made up of the descendants of the East European Jews who settled here long before the Second World War. The city's various Jewish communities have little to do with one another. Argentina is still a country of immigration. But today's immigrants come from Asia and are moving into what has traditionally been Buenos Aires' Jewish quarter. It's a development that inspired Arleon Magnus to write a novel that plays with Chinese and Jewish stereotypes. Although his grandparents were German Jewish immigrants, he describes himself first and foremost as Argentinian.
My father always used to say that he gave me a Jewish upbringing to give me an identity. I never understood what he meant, because to me my identity was Argentinian. I think the football team you support reveals where you come from, and my team is Argentina. I could never be a Germany supporter. So I'm Argentinian first. There's no two ways about it. Then I'm German. And being Jewish, I don't know, it's a sort of myth. It's there in the background and allows me to make jokes about Jewishness without being a Nazi or anti-Semitic, because I am a Jew myself.
The Jewish sports club Hakoach is an hour's drive from Buenos Aires. Until recently, Schopflocher came here regularly to row. He loves being outdoors. His first job in Argentina was managing Jewish agricultural estates out in the countryside. He got to see a culture and a way of life that's disappearing and has immortalized it in his novels and short stories.
There still are some settlements today, a few Jewish villages, but very few. The vibrant communities that used to exist here are long gone.
For many years, Schopflocher wrote in Spanish. He was over 70 before he began writing in German.
I'd reached my limitations in Spanish. I have yet to reach my limitations in German.
After more than 70 years in exile, German remains the language of Robert Schopflocher's dreams and imaginings. He's lived between three worlds for most of his life, but perhaps the life of the mind is his real home.
Next week, we go to Israel to meet the people known as Yekes and their descendants. German Jewish cultural heritage in Tel Aviv and Haifa.